At Balmoral Castle, tradition rules every corner, even when it makes no sense to modern eyes. Each morning, housemaids are required to curtsy to empty rooms. It doesn't matter if the royal has just stepped out, the staff still bow to the vacant space. This 150-year-old ritual has never been abolished. And that is only the beginning. Vacuum cleaners. Forbidden. Instead, carpets must be scrubbed on hands and knees hour after hour. Some staff endure 18-hour days for pay that doesn't even meet minimum wage. They are not to speak unless spoken to, and one leaked staff review labeled management as nothing short of toxic. But the strictness of the rules was only part of the story. Over the years, something darker crept in. Conditions so troubling that, on more than one occasion, groups of workers walked out in a single night. It all began in the summer of 1852. Prince Albert quietly spent $32,000 on Balmoral after spotting a rain-soaked advertisement for the estate. He didn't even tell Queen Victoria at first. To put that figure in perspective, today it would equal about $4.4 million. Within a few short years, the original house was demolished and replaced by a granite castle. Completed in 1856, Albert was deeply invested in the project. He even sketched the design of the clock tower himself. The estate kept expanding until it sprawled across more than 53,000 acres, making it larger than San Francisco or Paris. It included mountains, around 150 separate buildings, its own power supply, and by 1866, even a 3-mile private railway line created just to transport royal luggage in secret. Though many see Balmoral as part of the British nation, it is not crown property. It belongs privately to the royal family. Any money from deer hunting or renting cottages flows directly into their accounts. Some members of Parliament grumbled about this arrangement, but Edward VII brushed it aside, calling Balmoral the family's inescapable refuge. The castle, completed in 1856, stands like a storybook fortress. Its pale granite sparkles against the backdrop of the Scottish cairngorms. Prince Albert obsessed over every detail, the way windows opened to let in fresh air, or how the carvings of all 9 royal children should be placed around the entrance. Inside, there are 167 rooms. The corridors were deliberately designed to be narrow, so family members would bump into each other, encouraging closeness. The clock tower, inspired by a German castle, rings in E-flat, so as not to startle the ponies grazing nearby. Not everyone was charmed. Some contemporaries dismissed it as looking like a giant cold barn. Yet its style caught on quickly. Within 2 decades, about 80% of country homes in Scotland were being built in imitation of Balmoral's granite look. Queen Victoria, however, adored it, famously writing that it smelled of pine and freedom. When the royal family comes to Balmoral, they bring an entire workforce with them. During hunting season, about 150 staff live on the grounds, gillies for deer stalking, grooms for the horses, cooks, cleaners, and even a piper whose sole duty is to stand below the king's window at 7 a.m. and play the bagpipes. Every staff member must sign a vow of lifelong silence. Break it, and you're gone. Workdays can stretch to 18 hours. Maids polish hundreds of silver pieces, tend more than 50 fireplaces, and keep the flames fed with around 60 tons of birchwood each season. Meals may appear simple, picnics by the river, where even the king helps with the dishes, but the rules never bend. Some staff are forbidden from speaking unless spoken to, while others are required to live on the estate year-round and assist in culling 1 out of every 200 deer each winter. Maintaining the workforce costs more than $3 million annually, paid mostly from timber sales and cottage rentals. Once a year, the rigid formality eases. Since 1858, Balmoral has hosted the Gillies Ball each September. It begins at 7 p.m. when the monarch leads the first reel with a staff member. Here, even a dishwasher might find themselves dancing with a prince. Stories of the ball have become legend. Prince Philip was said to have once poured gin into the punch bowl to liven the mood. Princess Diana described the event as feeling like a prom mixed with Downton Abbey. Still, hierarchy is never forgotten. Gold-edged invitations are reserved for higher-ranking staff. Playing cards go to the rest, At midnight, the royals withdraw and everyone bows in silence. In 1991, a young footman sold a story about a barefoot dance to the press and was fired immediately. From then on, cameras were banned. Despite the rules, many staff look forward to the ball as the only evening of the year when they are allowed to call the king by his first name, Balmoral's. Location deep in the mountains, reachable only by a single narrow road, has always protected royal privacy. It was here that Queen Victoria's controversial friendship with her servant John Brown deepened. Edward VIII practiced his abdication speech within these walls, and when Princess Diana died in 1997, young Princes William and Harry were sheltered from the news for several hours in an attempt to preserve their peace. Yet leaks still happen. In 2019, a cleaner secretly photographed the royal children's treehouse. The palace reacted by banning all staff photography and even covering windows. Years earlier, another former worker sold tales of private habits like the Queen Mother's fondness for Dubonnet or Prince Andrew's insistence on exactly 28 golf balls. He was paid $90,000 but later sued. By 2024, even drones were blocked by sky fences installed around the grounds. For junior staff, the day begins at 6 a.m. with the polishing of more than 200 silver items before breakfast service at 8. Then come the long, silent walks through cold corridors with heavy kettles of tea, careful not to wake the royal dogs. Lunch preparations involve peeling 18 kilos of potatoes. At 4 p.m., it's time for tea service, and afterward, cleaning the mud from hunting boots. Most don't climb into their attic beds until about 9:45 at night. That's a 15-hour shift. No overtime, just a line in the staff manual. Loyalty is its own reward. Vacuum cleaners are not permitted because Queen Elizabeth disliked their sound. Instead, 2 maids would kneel with horsehair brushes and scrub. Just one hallway could take 45 minutes. By 1990, the housekeeper admitted this added 9 hours of labor each day, yet pay never increased. Some maids' wrists were so inflamed they couldn't hold utensils. Still, no one dared complain. The castle shone outwardly, while silent suffering lingered underneath. The culture of silence was so strict that even overhearing conversations was risky. In July 1986, a maid polishing furniture heard Prince Charles whisper something to Diana. Another servant quickly hissed at her to act deaf. The next morning, she received a written warning. The rule was clear. Acknowledge a royal conversation twice, and you were fired, and you lost your $250 end-of-season bonus. Staff developed hand signal systems to communicate quietly, especially during mealtimes. To many, the corridors of Balmoral felt quieter than a library, not from respect, but from fear. In 1983, a junior housemaid's salary was $18,000 before tax. That was only about $4,000 above the national average. Yet she worked 60-hour weeks and lived on site. Some parts of the castle still lacked proper plumbing, so maids carried chamber pots. It took 3 years to be promoted to first housemaid, raising pay to roughly $21,500. Male gamekeepers, however, earned about $26,000. Many young women left after only a year. A historian later described the atmosphere as like standing in the cold wearing silk gloves. A quiet tension always present. One tradition especially stunned newcomers. Even if a royal had just left a room, maids were expected to curtsy to the empty space, acknowledging the spirit of the royal. At the 1987 Gillies Ball, staff were recorded making 61 curtsies in a single evening. Knees bruised so badly that bandages were distributed with serving trays. "Nisk, it felt like bowing to ghosts," one maid later remarked. In March 1988, a French magazine published a tell-all from a young maid who had worked at Balmoral for just 8 weeks. She was reportedly paid $10,000 for her story, more than she would have earned in 8 years. Her revelations covered everything: dinner routines, private moments, even details such as which dog slept outside Princess Anne's door. Within 2 days, the UK tabloids had reprinted it, and millions read what was never meant to leave the castle walls. One story captured hearts. During a formal dinner in August 1987, a guest mistakenly drank from his finger bowl, believing the rose-scented water was soup. Rather than embarrass him, the Queen quietly sipped from her bowl, and the rest of the family followed. Staff counted 17 empty bowls by the end of the meal. Not every tale was charming. The Maid claimed that during Margaret Thatcher's 1987 visit, the Prime Minister was not housed in the castle, but in a distant cottage staff cruelly nicknamed Siberia. The palace denied it, but the press thrived on the rumor of icy relations between two powerful women. On Charles and Diana, however, the Maid painted a tender picture, like two teenagers in love. Charles fetched Diana's coat himself, while Diana discreetly tipped the stable boys. But even such sweetness could not disguise the harsh truth. Housemaids earned just $75 a week, and over time often went unpaid. The palace branded the leak a gross breach of trust. Security rules were tightened immediately. From then on, new staff underwent thorough background checks and signed secrecy agreements tied to the Official Secrets Act. Speaking to the press meant the end of a career.